Hello, everyone. I'm Keith DeStone, and I'm here as always with Greg Nagy and Sarah and Jenna and Aylan for Office Hours for HeroesX. This is v15 of HeroesX, and we are talking about the conversation that's ongoing on the discussion board about hours 12 and 13. So the hour 12 question that you, Greg, posed for our participants goes like this. We can say that Homeric poetry, unlike Hesiodic poetry, does not address directly this question, what is justice and what is injustice? But can we say that Homeric poetry does not address this question, what is right and what is wrong? So that's a potentially subtle distinction between justice and injustice versus right and wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how are people interpreting this one?
Well, one participant is writing about the passage when the disguised Odysseus praises Penelope for having well-ruled Ithaca. And can we say that Homeric poetry shows what it is to rule with acts of good dikē, like a faultless Basileus? Talking about Penelope, of course.
Yes, yes. Well, that is definitely the one case in the Odyssey where social justice is foregrounded, and the idea of a just king is foregrounded. But isn't it wonderful, or isn't it amazing, that the Odyssey presents this idealized version of the king in a comparison that involves Penelope, not Odysseus, and where Penelope is the one who somehow embodies what a truly just king in a just society, where everything prospers and is literally fertile, can happen. There's so many things like that in the Odyssey, where what you expect to be foregrounded is somehow expressed indirectly. But one of my other favorite examples, and I hope we're not going too far off track, is when in the horrific scene of the blinding of the Cyclops, Polyphemus, when you read that, and you see the horrific simile where, as the sharpened stake enters the eye, the single eye of the Cyclops, there is this sound, again, terrifying to contemplate. The simile, that is to say, the comparison, is how a blacksmith tempers red hot iron and thus produces steel. So a great advance in technology. And folklorists will tell us, oh, well, all over the world, we can find myths about a culture hero who defeats the hostile forces of nature by way of technology. And the way the defeat is imagined is the blinding of an ogre. And so here's a situation where you have that folkloristic theme, which is so central, how technology can humanize, but it's done in a simile rather than in a direct narrative. And similarly, what our participant has acutely noticed, the idea of an ideal king in an ideal society, which in, for example, Sanskrit epic would be handled in a much more direct way, is handled in this indirect way.
We have a comment about can we see the right and wrong or justice or injustice questions as similar to ainos? Those who are qualified will understand.
And in fact, this participant's observation helps us understand why sometimes something that is indirect can be very important, maybe all important, and how so many times the discourse of ainos, where things are not spelled out directly, where the discourse of ainos does give you the essentials of with the moral message of the Odyssey or of Homeric poetry in general.
Someone's been making a comparison between Hesiod and the Odyssey. So he's picked up on how Hesiod and his brother Perseus, and the word dikē is used.
Yeah.
And then comparing it to the dispute of Odysseus with the suitors and over property and holding the scepter. So he's drawing several analogies there, I think, because we see the scepter that the Muses give to Hesiod. We have the scepter of rule. Are some of those points of language, points of terminology, things that we should be looking out for when we're thinking about this question?
Oh, definitely. But again, I think what surprises us maybe is that in Homeric poetry, these messages can be so indirect, and you really have to work at getting the messages. Seldom do we see something really spelled out. And I think that's why I'm so troubled by how the unbridled violence that happens at the end of the Odyssey, which becomes shocking, I think, and morally shocking, can somehow not be rationalized on the surface. And in my recent years of rereading Homeric poetry, I've come to see that we have to dig deep when we confront these shocking scenes of violence, because if we just rationalize them, oh, back then justice was swift. I've heard people say things like that. No, you can't, I think, justify the kind of mass killings and cruelty and near bestiality that you see there if there isn't something more to it. And I think there is something more to it. And that something is the cleansing effect, the purifying effect of how we process such violence in the heroic period as we live our own lives in the post-heroic period. And we need the heroic period for us to think things through and even process our feelings, our emotions, and not just our thinking. But in the end, I think the only way Homeric poetry makes sense to me as a moral code, as a code that has a universally moral message, which I think it does have, is to understand that there are some things that are not spelled out, and that you have to be not just intellectually receptive, but I would say morally and emotionally receptive as well. And that's what the ainos is all about.
All right, well, let's go to the hour 13 question. How do your readings in Herodotus help you see more clearly the nature of heroes in the Homeric Iliad and Odyssey? Give a specific example.
Yes, one participant is giving a general example, but he's writing the reading of the tale of Solon and King Croesus in Herodotus, and about the explanation of the different meanings of the term Urbios has helped me understand that in the Odyssey, when Tiresias says to Odysseus, the people all around you will be blessed, albioi, Okay, so does that imply that Odysseus is blessed, Olbios also?
Yes, oh yes, definitely. Being Olbios is a reciprocal force. That is to say, there's give and take. And if the cult hero is Olbios, blessed, then contact with the cult hero, whether it's mental or even physical, makes you Olbios as well. It's almost a tactile thing, isn't it? And touching is important. Or let's say it metaphorically, being touched by the message of the hero is important. There, I just used physical and mental dimensions of the way we in English say touch. And I must say the Herodotus passage about Solon and Croesus helps me so much with my own understanding or in my attempt to understand Odyssey 24, and how when the spirit of Agamemnon, by hindsight, says that Achilles is Olbios. Oh, I see that. Achilles is the perfect example of a cult hero. When you look at the hero retrospectively, when you look at the epic reputation of a hero retrospectively, in terms of how the hero in the here and now is worshipped, fine. But then when Odysseus is also described as Olbios, you realize, oh, this is uncomfortable. He's not yet Olbios because his story is not done yet. Even as late as Odyssey 24, it's not done. And in a sense, then you have to go backward in time, and as our participant has done, and say, well, what does Tiresias say? And how does Tiresias forecast, predict what will be the Olbios Odysseus, who is not yet Olbios in the heroic time and place of the Odyssey? It has to be a prediction, it has to be forecast.
Following on that, a poster mentioned what Achilles' spirit said at Hades. Yes. You know, I would rather be a servant than a poor man's house, rather than king among deaths. Is he questioning his decision? Poster asks. Is there regret?
See, I'm perfectly happy to think of Achilles as having, may I say it this way, a different identity in the Odyssey, because the Odyssey has a different message. And the star of the Odyssey is not Achilles, it's Odysseus. This does not mean that I have to be trapped into saying, oh, there are two authors. No, there are not two authors, but they're two sides of the same coin. And you see how Achilles can be foregrounded by just experiencing the Iliad. And you can see how Odysseus is foregrounded when you experience the Odyssey. And yes, it's at the expense of Achilles. Well, the Odyssey makes up for it, I think, in Odyssey 24, as we see Achilles in the meadow of Asphodel. That's a good place for him to be. So I think Achilles is all right. But there are these moments where you can look at life very differently if you experience the Odyssey at that moment and not the Iliad. My old professor, John Finley, I've told you all this anecdote so many times, I'm sure I'm repeating myself, but he used to be asked whether he's an Iliad person or an Odyssey person. And he'd say, it depends on what I'm reading.
Like that. one of the participants has been picking up on the keyword for this hour, krinein, and partly in reference to that choice of Achilles that we were just talking about. But then also, would that be something that we can then look back on the other Homeric heroes and look at the times where they make judgments, decisions, choices? Is that something that's important in shaping whether or what kind of cult hero somebody becomes?
Yes, it does. And of course, we know only a fraction of the story because so much has been lost. But even from what we have, we can reconstruct that every hero has his or her own crisis, that critical moment where our own critical capacities have to be challenged. And these matters are always matters for us as well, as people who experience the Iliad and Odyssey. And it's not one reading. That's the way we text people might think of it. Imagine in a song culture where you've heard the Iliadic and the Odyssey and shall we say narratives over and over and over again in different phases of your life, maybe different parts of the narratives in different parts of your phases of life. It's also cohesive. It's also integral, and this song culture is the song culture of the society. Whereas for us, we have to reconstruct it all the time because it's not our society. And I think that's okay. Just to say, it's for me such a joy to immerse myself in a world where things work out. That's pretty good. And where things don't work out, and we're coming to that with tragedy, well, that's the whole point. And when people come to me and say, could you recommend some book that explains what tragedy is? I said, just reread the tragedies. They're problems that will not go away because of our human condition. So I'm not saying that everything is solved with the ancient Greek song culture, hardly. But let's put it this way. What people were grappling with then, all the problems of the human condition play out there. And when I say play out, that sounds too playful. It can be dead serious because your own life can be dead serious. But sometimes we look at our life with, I hope, a sense of humor. And so I think the strangeness of Greek civilization, because let's face it, we are not ancient Greeks, and the ancient Greeks are not what we are.
All right. Well, thank you, friends, for joining me again. I love these conversations that we have. So
they're a delight.
we'll see you all next time.